The ancient Greek philosophers all agreed that there is a natural order, and humans have a place in it. Nature determines that our end is eudaimonia, which means well-being or happiness. They also agreed that virtue, which is arete in Greek, is connected with eudaimonia, and they agreed that the cardinal virtues of wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance are important virtues. They disagreed about what human nature is and what the world is like as a whole, and they disagreed about the precise relationship between happiness and virtue. There are also some differences in the virtues they thought are most important. But the groundwork laid by these philosophers came to shape Western ethics in one way or another for 2,500 years. This week you are reading selections from Aristotle and the Stoic philosopher Seneca. Stoicism was a form of Hellenistic philosophy. Hellenism is the word we use for philosophy in the later ancient world influenced by Greece. Here is a timeline of ancient Greek and Hellenistic philosophy. The pre-Socratics were Greek philosophers whose work we have in fragmentary form, dating from the 6th and 5th centuries before the Christian era. Socrates, his student Plato, and his student Aristotle lived in Athens in the 5th and 4th centuries. Epicurus lived in the generation after Aristotle and was the founder of Epicureanism. His contemporary, Zeno of Citium, started a school in Athens and was the founder of Stoicism. Stoicism was very popular in the Roman Empire, and Seneca was one of the later Roman Stoics. He was born in southern Spain in 4 BC, which means he might have been born in the same year as Jesus, since historians believe that Jesus was probably born a few years before the year 1. Epictetus was another Stoic whose writings you would enjoy. Epictetus was born a slave, but Marcus Aurelius, another important Stoic, was emperor of Rome. I have decided to have you read selections from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics because it is still the classic work in virtue ethics, and it is the first systematic treatment of ethics in Western history. I have selected Seneca because I want you to see an example of an especially influential form of ancient ethics that makes an interesting comparison with Aristotle. When you read Seneca, I think you will find that Stoicism is different from what you expect from the English word stoical, and in my opinion, it is much more appealing. Let's start with the Greeks before Aristotle. Even as far back as Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, composed many centuries before Plato and Aristotle, we find the view that there is a natural order in which each person has a social role, and there are virtues that enable the person to perform that role well. The Homeric scale of values emphasizes the virtues of the warrior, like courage in battle. By the time of Plato and Aristotle, in the 5th and 4th centuries in Athens, we see a shift to the importance of justice. City life requires the virtue of justice even more than the virtue of courage. Plato's Republic is primarily devoted to answering the question, what is justice? And why should we want to be just? The tight connection among the ideas of nature, of function or role, virtue, and happiness is set in the Republic and continues in different forms in Aristotle and throughout the Hellenistic era and beyond. I think it would be fair to say that the connection among these ideas has never really disappeared. At the beginning of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle says that everyone agrees that the aim of human living is a good life, or eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is usually translated happiness, but that can be misleading because we sometimes think of happiness very narrowly as just feeling good. But eudaimonia is more like well-being or flourishing. So everyone agrees that what they aim for is eudaimonia. What they disagree about is the kind of life that is eudaimon, or happy. Is it a life of pleasure, a life of honor, a life of virtue, a life of thought, or something else? To resolve the disagreement, Aristotle asks an interesting question. What is the ergon, the function or task of a human being as a human being? He is not asking what is one's function in society or in one's family or business or community, but what is one's function by nature as a human being? You can ask this question whether you are a mother or a son, a soldier, a tailor, or a farmer, or a modern worker in a large urban corporation. Everybody can ask this question, and everybody expects the same answer as long as human beings have a function in nature. Aristotle says that the function of a thing is determined by the kind of thing that it is, and to see that, we need to look at how it differs from other kinds of things. So, to give one of Plato's examples, the function of a knife is to be a tool of a specific kind, one that cuts. In the biological realm also, the function of each kind of animal has something to do with what makes that kind of animal different from other kinds. Fish and dogs and pigs and humans all have different functions that we can determine by looking at what makes them different from each other. For humans, Aristotle says that what makes us different is our power of reason. We are the only species that has rational powers as well as powers of perception, activity, and feeling. A good life for an animal of a certain kind is a life of performing its function well. A good dog does distinctively dog activities well. A good human does human activities well under the guidance of reason. A virtue or excellence is a quality that enables an animal to perform its function well, which in the case of humans includes traits that allow us to perform human physical, social, and intellectual activities in a way that controls and directs the emotions and keeps the activities under the guidance of reason. Temperance, courage, justice, wisdom, communicative and social virtues, virtues of friendship, virtues that enable us to properly handle honor and shame, virtues that enable us to properly handle money. All of these traits are virtues because they are what humans need to live a life of well-being, a life of happiness. So, Aristotle closely connects the ideas of nature, function, well-being, and virtue. The end by nature of any kind of animal is to live well. To live well is to perform well the function of that kind of animal. The function of a kind of animal is the performance of distinctive activities of that kind of animal. A virtue is a quality that enables an animal to perform its function well. What is distinctive of humans is the power of reason. So, a human virtue is a quality that enables humans to perform characteristic human activities under the governance of reason. A life of human well-being or happiness, then, is a life of characteristic human activities lived virtuously. Is happiness up to us? If virtue is up to us, it is not by chance that we are happy, because the major part of happiness is living virtuously. However, Aristotle admits that chance can deprive us of complete happiness. If all our friends die, or we're poor, or we live in an unjust city, we will not be able to fully flourish, to live a life of complete well-being. So there are things we can't control, but for the most part, our happiness is in our own hands.